And speaking of legends that have disgraced themselves in recent years, sad tweet this week was a slam dunk, and it goes to Ric Flair. You know, people were joking online that he might have been hitting the bottle a little too hard yesterday. No, he's just an asshole and showing himself for what he really is. No need to make excuses for the guy. First, he tweeted out a photo of a mock sexual consent contract that he called the Woo Compromise, which is actually not new. It's something he sold signed copies of on his website in 2018 for $50 a pop as a Valentine's Day gimmick before WWE asked him to take it down, so it wasn't up for very long. All of a sudden, yesterday, it resurfaced, and it lays out the terms for mutual consent in sexual encounters with the Nature Boy. It said, by signing this compromise, both parties involved agree to ride Space Mountain and engage in sexual relations on this night. So I'm just wondering, like, are those two separate things then? Like the way it's written here, it almost reads like two separate things. Do you actually get to ride the real Space Mountain and then have sex with Ric Flair? I don't know. It says this contract adheres to guidelines of informed consent, and both people in the relationship must be present and not in an intoxicated state before signing. No party should be pressured or persuaded into something they do not want to do, and they reserve the right to terminate the contract if need be. This contract has the signed and sealed approval of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who has taken many women for a ride on Space Mountain and has the utmost respect for women. Oh yeah, I'm sure he does. Says the guy who used to helicopter his dick around at women and has been divorced 4 times. I guess this was his attempt at humor, although I'm not sure why he decided to post this now after so many years, but whatever. That would have been one thing if that was the only thing he tweeted. But right after that, it might have even been within an hour of each other, he posts this, tagging Jim Ross, who just this week had surgery for colon cancer. Jim Ross will always be Jim Ross, seeking attention. Focus on your recovery at JRSBBQ. Ric Flair calling out Jim Ross for seeking attention, calling out anybody for seeking attention. Now that's rich. That's rich. That's so rich, Flair hid it up for money so that he could pay back the IRS. That's how rich it is. What an absolutely shameful thing to say to somebody who just had cancer surgery this week. And for what? That he didn't say. But the Podcast Heat channel on YouTube just released a video clip from a longer show. I guess you would call it show. It was JR and Tony Schiavone. They were riding down the road in the car. JR was sitting in the passenger seat telling a story with Schiavone behind the wheel. This isn't recent. I don't believe it's that recent. It may have been from a year or two ago. I don't remember exactly when this was recorded, but it's not like it was recorded 2 weeks ago. But what they're probably doing is cutting up clips from a larger video and then releasing them in pieces. And in this clip, JR told a story, which I absolutely believe is real, about once going to a birthday party for Gary Juster's wife. Gary Juster was a promoter and an executive for Jim Crockett Promotions. He worked for WCW. He's worked for Ring of Honor, even MLW. Right? Gary Juster has been around forever. And it was a small gathering, and again, birthday party for his wife, who was this very homely school teacher, apparently. And there were only a few wrestlers there. Flair was one of them. Kevin Sullivan was there. His wife at the time, Nancy, the future Nancy Benoit, JR. So Flair shows up with his garment bag. This is after a show that night. He heads right to the bathroom. He comes out of the bathroom, and he's wearing his robe, a shirt, shoes, knee-high socks, and no pants, and no underwear. But he's got a giant boner. And he begins strutting around the restaurant. Totally normal behavior. But we've heard a million stories like this about Flair over the years. This was just JR chilling in the car with Schiavone, and the camera's rolling, and he's telling stories. That's all this was. It's not like we haven't heard stories about Flair like this before. It's not like he recorded the fucking thing last week either. Flair, though, must have gotten wind of it now. And he decided, you know what? Now would be a hell of a time to call JR an attention whore. And to basically mind your own business. Of course, neither of the two tweets are up anymore. He deleted them both. And then he posted this. He said, "If you can't take a joke from a 76-year-old man, then you are living life too seriously. It was all harmless, lighthearted fun, just trying to make people laugh and smile." I'm assuming that's in reference to the mock contract. That still doesn't explain the JR tweet. There's nothing funny about that. And no, he wasn't drunk. And no, he wasn't hacked. He's just an asshole. And he wins the award for sad tweet. Eric Bischoff, on a recent episode of his 83 Weeks podcast, was talking about Bill Goldberg's upcoming retirement match, which is rumored for Atlanta on Saturday night's main event next month. He talked about how instrumental Hulk Hogan was in elevating Goldberg in WCW, and he believes that Hogan should be present for Goldberg's final match. And for him not to be, it would be incomplete for Goldberg's story. I guess he wants Hogan there so that Goldberg can finish his story. He said it was Atlanta. It was Hulk Hogan that said, "I want to get Bill Goldberg over as much as I can," and volunteered to do business with Bill in Atlanta. That wasn't my idea. That wasn't Bill's idea. That wasn't Ted Turner's idea. That was Hulk Hogan's idea, because he believed that much in Bill Goldberg. To not have Hulk there for a match like this would be, I don't know, an incomplete story. I don't think Hogan needs to be anywhere near this, because then the story shifts from Goldberg's retirement to Hogan got booed again. And honestly, that's not fair to Goldberg. But I can't deny what Hogan did for Goldberg that night was huge for him. I mean, whatever you think his ulterior motives may have been, I'm sure Hogan didn't just do it out of the goodness of his heart. But that night, he did the clean job, right? None of that kick out at 3.1 nonsense that he pulled before with people like the Warrior, or the bullshit with Sting at Starrcade. That's an example of how to fuck up an entire storyline and do things the wrong way. This was an example of how to do things the right way. You know, he did for Goldberg that night what Andre did for him. Now, should they have done it on pay-per-view instead of free TV? Probably. But they got destroyed in the ratings the week before, and Bischoff just lived and died by the ratings. I mean, his entire podcast is named for the 83 weeks they beat Raw in the ratings. It's his entire existence. Plus, they had pay-per-view matches that were already planned with Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone, and the Jay Leno crap they did in August. I'm sure that was all worked out well in advance. So, you know, maybe they felt like they couldn't move those matches, and so it was now or never. Like, I don't know. But they had 40,000 people in the Georgia Dome that night. Or actually, it was 41,000. They claimed 39 on TV. I've never seen a promotion do that before, by the way. I've seen plenty of promotions, and WWE has made an Olympic sport out of this, of over-exaggerating their attendance or overinflating their numbers. So if they did 50,000, they'll call it 60,000, right? You've heard of promotions do that before. I've never heard of a promotion that actually undersold what their legitimate attendance was. But I remember Tony Schiavone, we got 39,000 people here in the Georgia Dome. They had a lot of people there. And it is the greatest moment in Nitro history. Nitro had a lot of great moments. That was the biggest and greatest moment in Nitro history. You could say that Scott Hall showing up was maybe the most significant. That's fair. But just in terms of moments, this is it. It's Hogan Goldberg in the Georgia Dome and Goldberg getting him up for the jackhammer. And then just look at that crowd reaction when the referee counts 3. It was the peak of Goldberg's career. You know, he's about to wrestle his retirement match in 2025, but the absolute peak of that man's wrestling career was July 6th, 1998. And Hogan, you know, for all the things we could say about Hulk Hogan and the kind of person he is, no one worked the big spectacle match better than Hogan. Hogan Andre, Hogan Warrior, Hogan Goldberg, Hogan Rock. Some of the most legendary matches of all time. Nobody can take that away from him. But this isn't about Hogan. It's about Goldberg. Keep him the fuck away. On a positive note, though, the surgery that JR had this week was to remove cancer from 2 different areas, and he said the surgery was a success, and now the rehab begins. He didn't say anything about having to undergo chemo or radiation. It's always possible. The doctors want to make absolutely sure that any trace of cancer is gone, but that's all he said, so that's all we know. All the best to JR. He has said that he hopes to return soon to AEW. He would like to be in Arlington for All In Texas. That would be nice, to hear him on the call for at least one match on that show. He's the greatest to ever do it. Dave Meltzer said this week that going forward, the Best Announcer Award in the Observer Awards will be renamed the Jim Ross Award, since he won the damn thing 14 times. I think that's very appropriate.